Okay. Are we back? Whoops. Let me see. Okay. The stream is back. I put my music on again. All right. So, where did we leave off? I believe we were talking about how to apply the conjunction on a more personal level, right? And the impact of it specifically being in Saturn and making like predictions. So, let me see. I suppose we are just gonna pull up. For now, I'm gonna pull up more. My God, I can't think. Websites? Sources? All right. Okay. Let's see here. This one's cut off. Okay. Let me just, okay. Okay, is this more about, this is like an overall April forecast. Okay. All right. But they do have something. Okay. On the heels of an explosive solar eclipse, we experience a full stop as Mars meets up with Saturn in Pisces on April 10th. Saturn is the wet blanket of the zodiac and represents restriction and responsibility. When it gets in Mars's way, our ability to take action becomes blocked, resulting in tension and frustration. Okay. Mars in Pisces also struggles to express anger. For most of us, anger carries negative connotations and is considered a weakness. However, when handled correctly, anger can be a helpful emotion as it draws our attention to anything that has become oppressive, threatens our will, or violates our values and beliefs. Okay, so we did discuss before how Saturn in Pisces can act as like a divine authority, and Mars can sometimes trigger you to either feel driven to connect with this divine authority, or push them away. And this can also be authority in the sense of like a mental thing, like a inner critic, or just kind of like a more spiritual type of authority figure, not necessarily one that has like a physical form. So, let's see. This is Vedic, so this might not tell us. I mean, it does. Oh, but this is based on the eclipse, right? Okay. Okay. So, let's return here for a second. I don't think it would be nice if my Saturn in Transit book spoke more. Well, okay, there is a section I even highlighted stuff about Saturn being in water signs. This might have more to do with like having this as a natal placement, but Saturn's bias in water signs colors the feeling function with fear. Of all the human qualities, feelings carry the greatest risk when they are invested because their value is immaterial and therefore irrecoverable. However, the feeling function is our capacity to appreciate whether or not something has value, depth, and meaning. On the negative side, the feeling function is highly judgmental, and with Saturn emphasizing the element water, hasty and importunate opinions can be formed as a defense against invasion. Okay. So, yeah, obviously there's a lot of mistrust around Saturn. I can understand where that stems from, but at the same time, as a Capricorn rising, I do have a lot of appreciation for Saturn and the lessons that he has given me. So, I don't see it as all negative, but he is still the disciplinarian. I don't know if this really has anything particularly relevant either, but I do have this really massive book that might be interesting to look at, as well as, let me just take a look inside. Chani Nicholas's book, You Were Born for This. There might not be any. This more so covers. Yeah, I don't think this is really gonna. This is still a good book, but it more so covers your sun placement, moon placement, and your rising sign. So like your big three. But still, it's well written, and I'm a big supporter of Chani, so. A lot of people do fear Saturn, so that's for sure. I don't think that their fears are completely unfounded, right? Saturn does cause delays. It does cause challenges. It does cause blockages. It can cause fear. But it's not like he does any of those things just because, right? They all serve a greater purpose. They're all meant to teach you something. I almost kind of see it as like a person being the same kind of nervousness you might feel about a strict parental figure. Maybe this strict parental figure, you know that they love you and that they have your best interests at heart, but you still fear disappointing them. Or, you know, if you do something like that you know is wrong, there's still a fear of consequences. You know what I mean? Let's take a look at this big old book I have here. This is Parker's Astrology, and it's huge. Let's see. I really say too freaking much. Move my keyboard aside for a second, because this is such a big old book. If any book I have is going to have a mentioning of the Saturn signs, it would be this one, because there's a lot of stuff in here. And I think it does actually cover a little bit of the transits too, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. Pluto. I should also mention, oh, thank you. For a second, I misread that and thought it was an abbreviation of something, and I read it as "Don't worry about the UMS," and I was like, UMS? That's that Mercury retrograde. Alright. Okay, this is aspects with Saturn, transits with Saturn, okay. Oh, and I did want to mention, obviously, shades, I'm already aware that you have your Saturn in Pisces, natally. But just in case this video is ever watched by others who do not have this natally, I just want to mention that they've been feeling the effects of Pisces ever since the Saturn Pisces transit started, right? I feel like Saturn transits are always going to be hard to miss. So even though these people are not experiencing the Saturn return, they're still facing their own types of delays. That being said, the Mars-Saturn conjunction will likely will be part of that story that's playing out, and that's in that section of your chart. So I just wanted to mention that. It's not like this transit is, because I think I mentioned before that the transit was for people with experiencing their Saturn return in Pisces. This is part of that Saturn return. I still think, that is still true, but it can affect you regardless, whether or not it's your Saturn return. So, according to Parker's Astrology, Saturn transits, okay. This is the Saturn transit with Mars conjunction, and it reads, this indicates a rather tricky period when there will be a tremendous outpouring of energy alternating with lethargy. Optimistic assertiveness, then no desire for action whatsoever. It won't be easy to keep a balance, and all the subject can do is try to work steadily and not be too enthusiastic about any projects. It is important for him or her to keep calm and listen carefully to what is suggested. then allow plenty of thinking time before making a commitment. In this way, some sort of balance will be achieved, and if it isn't, the chances are that the resulting frustration and annoyance will be even more upsetting. In theory, this influence should encourage determination, but that is not always the case. I was kind of hoping that they would have a section. This is the transits, but what about, okay, they have Saturn through the houses. What about anything? Okay. I think that the dichotomy of Saturn and Pisces is actually really fascinating. I've obviously done a lot of more research on it because it's, I know, my natal placement, I know it's yours too. So, that being said, let me also take a look at Mars in Pisces, which I am less familiar with. Mars, okay. When Mars is in Pisces, this is probably going to be speaking as though this is a natal placement, but we're going to do it anyway. This considerably raises the emotional level, sometimes to a torrent. There must be some channel for all this emotion so that it can be positively used and not allowed to stagnate or be blocked by psychological problems. Here is a very sensual, passionate lover who will make great sacrifices for love, but who will sometimes sacrifice love itself in order to follow, with equal fervor, a vocation geared toward helping those in need. Okay. A little bit confusing, but it does also mention this is a, I've heard that with this particular transit, you really also want to be careful. This probably just goes with having Mars in Pisces overall, like the entire transit of Mars in Pisces, not just the conjunction. But really during this time, you want to be careful with hidden dangers, right? Pisces makes things more murky, makes things harder to see. So be careful of, like, you know, spiked drinks or, you know, be careful in cars. You know, with this kind of thing, it's like you always have to be more conscious of your surroundings. With that being said, I also can't help but wonder if, like, this is probably also a time period where you might want to be careful of dangerous energy in the spiritual sense. Like, perhaps this, if you're not careful, this could be a time to invite some spirits or entities into your life that wish you harm if you're not too careful with that. But yeah, it's a little bit difficult to say. I think it also kind of depends on the aspects that it's making in your chart specifically. But now I do want to kind of go over, like, more individual stuff. And I don't know if I should go in order, or since you're here, Shades, I could literally just skip straight to talking about maybe Mars conjunct Saturn for Scorpio rising. Now, just to see, I am going to look up Mm. This is where things start to get a little bit trickier to find information on, and might have more luck asking for assistance from ChatGPT. Astrology is always about putting together puzzle pieces, right? If Mars means this and Saturn means this, and this sign means this, well, then Mars in this sign means this, and then if this house means this, then Mars in this sign in this house means this. And it's really about putting together all of these like puzzle pieces. That's sometimes how you kind of have to approach it in using AI programs as well. I mean, I'm not too familiar with any other AI search engine type of things. But all right. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna first try to like make my own guess. Just for clarity's sake, I am going to pull up the Scorpio Rising chart wheel. And let's see if we can find one that's... Okay. Good, we have a nice picture here. Oh, and they actually... This is an interesting website. Might want to keep that in mind for later. AskAstrology.com. So, we have... This is obviously goes by whole signs. But we can see that this conjunction will be happening in the 5th house for you, right? So what do we... This is where it's like we have to start putting the puzzle pieces together, and this is why I usually like to kind of take down notes to kind of help myself out. Saturn, and let me see if I can try to summarize it into like 1 or 2 good words. Let's just take, I'm just going to write down some general stuff that Saturn in Pisces. I mentioned in a comment previously that Saturn in Pisces has a lot to do with balancing idealism with real life, right? Mars in Pisces what can we gain, what do we know about Mars in Pisces, right? I don't think I really had a specific... I mean, Parker's Astrology did mention it a little briefly, but let me also... Oh, did I pull this up? I can't even... Okay, I don't know why. Oh, it's because I put Scorpio Rising. It instead took me to that. Okay. I might mute for a second just because I gotta let some people into my house. And I have a feeling that they're gonna be noisy. So give me 1 second. Hello. I have returned. All right. Let me just... Okay. So, what were we last doing? Thank you, thank you. It doesn't look like the window is appearing on the screen, and why is that? Nope. Aha. Okay. All right, so here's the deal. This stream might not be quite as long as I anticipated. I'll need to find out if I can merge this video with the other video I did earlier today. But I am going to try to go over at least Scorpio rising, and then we'll go from there. I might end the chat in the stream early. We'll see. Okay. So, okay, so again, we were saying before that the fifth, we were like, it's in the fifth house. We need to think of the thing that says puzzle pieces, right? So, foot is itching. Let's see, where's my little notes? Oh, that's right, we were going to look up Mars and Pisces. For this, I kind of want to utilize ChatGPT for a moment, because I'm going to ask it to give me a quick overview of the traits you would associate with Mars in Pisces. Oh, Saturn Pisces has I'll say teaches. Okay. Mars in Pisces. Oh, that's right. Mars in Pisces is creative energy. Intensified emotions. I'll say intensified, but intensified emotions, but expressed indirectly, because Pisces does not like confrontation. And we can return to this. For now, I'm going to leave it at that, because let's see what else. So, here on this website, Ask Astrology, we see that they have summarized a Pisces ruled 5th house as a sacred quest for creativity, which is very interesting. Because typically we have to remember that Pisces is about the ethereal, right? It's about the spiritual. When it's ruling the house of creativity, you likely have like an intensified imagination and heightened creativity. But it also means probably that I shouldn't say, it doesn't always mean this, but it can definitely mean that there is like, creativity for you is also an expression of your spirituality. Like the two can be intertwined. So, you shades happen to have Saturn in Pisces natally. So, what I would typically first... Oh, forgot. We also need to take into account the planets that Saturn and Mars rules over in your chart. So in this case, Saturn rules the... Move this a little bit. Rules the 3rd house and 4th house if we went by traditional astrology. But rules the 3rd, 4th houses for you. And then Mars rules 2 houses as well, because if we take into account modern and traditional rulership. So Mars rules the 1st house and also the 6th house. Okay, so it gets a little bit confusing if you take into account all 4 of the houses that it rules over. So just for now, I'm going to focus more on the modern rulership. So we're going to say that Mars rules your 6th and Saturn rules your 3rd. Just to make it a little bit less confusing for me, we can always try to add in that stuff later. Alright, so Saturn rules the 3rd house in your chart. Mars rules the 6th house. Now, I'm going to try to keep this a little bit slightly more broad for Scorpio rising. Obviously, it gets more detailed if you take into consideration where Mars and Saturn are in your chart natally. But in this case, here's what we know. Saturn transits will always impact your 3rd house, and Mars transits will always impact your 6th house. So, because Saturn rules the 3rd house, most of what this planet does is essentially with the 3rd house in mind. So that would be intellect, communication, learning, studying, short distance travel, siblings, etc. I put, yeah, travel. And then Mars, so most of what, so most actions, I'll say most actions taken by Mars are essentially with the 6th house in mind. So that would be so that would be work, daily habits, routine, health, self-development, self-mastery, personal skills, etc. Okay. With that in mind, right, we now look at what is the goal of Saturn and Mars coming together in Pisces in your 5th house. And it's probably to amplify this sacred quest for creativity, like it's mentioned here. If we think about how these two energies merge together, right, they're trying to work together towards a common goal. Even if at times it can seem like they're working against each other, in a conjunction, they are trying to merge. They are trying to work towards the same goal. So, what that can mean then is if Saturn and Mars both are about creativity, and they are both about, especially in this 5th house, right? In this 5th house, both planets are likely trying to activate your creativity, your hobbies, your joy, etc. The overarching goal has something to do with the sacred quest for creativity, while the planet's individual goals has to do with their separate houses. Oh, why the sad face? Troubles with communication in 3rd house. Well, that probably is an issue, just having Capricorn ruling the 3rd house. But specifically with this transit, I don't know. Didn't mean to put a question mark. So it's kind of like they have a common goal together, and it's like they've decided that, hey, if we come together and work, let's say they both decided, if we activate the 5th house, this can benefit both of our houses, the 3rd and the 6th. So, what might that mean? It can mean that the 5th, your creativity is being ignited. Oh, okay. Yeah. Let me just give you a little... No. Okay. My mouth is itching. Okay, so as I was saying, that they've basically decided to like merge together, shake hands. We're like, if we come together and activate this creativity, this creative house, it can benefit the both of us. How might that play out? Well, if we, and again, this is accounting for kind of Scorpio rising as on a broader scale. Obviously, if you want something more personal, you'd have to look at how the conjunction, the transits it's making with, or the aspects it's making with other planets in your chart. And you'd also have to look at where Mars and Saturn is in your chart. But for Scorpio rising as a whole, I'm going to say that how this could activate is, let's say, you desire to have a more spiritual connection with your creativity. Capricorn, the Saturn in Pisces, rules over your third house. You might become more interested in learning, in studying. You might take up more of an interest on reading or gaining knowledge in how to kind of fulfill this quest for creativity. What are some other ways that I feel like it could play out? Let's see. Saturn, how about we kind of think of it like this? How does Saturn benefit from lighting up your fifth house of creativity? Well, Saturn's goal is likely for, I mean, if you look at it here, this kind of gives a good understanding. Saturn's goal is an ambitious quest for understanding, right? Capricorn in the third house wants to gain knowledge. So, and the thing is, with Capricorn in the third house, Capricorn is more interested in practical knowledge. So, in this case, right, and I'm saying this maybe for you specifically just because I know that you have Saturn in Pisces natally. But Saturn, wants you to, it's almost like Saturn wants you to mix practicality with spirituality. So if his overall goal for in this third house, at least the transiting Saturn, right, is for you to be on a quest for understanding and to gain practical knowledge, that practical knowledge is likely knowledge that he would want you to apply to Piscean things like spirituality, like mental health, like creativity. And then Mars, what is Mars's overall goal for you in the sixth house? We can see right here that this person has summarized it really well, is Mars's goal for you is for you to be independent in your quest for service, right? Or in other words, your daily habits, your work life, they are things that you achieve independently. Mars wants you to be more of your own driving force in this area, right? So how does Mars get what they're looking for by this conjunction? Well, if your desire for creativity is being sparked, you might decide, well, if I want to go on this sacred quest for creativity, maybe I need to kind of create like a little schedule for myself. Maybe I need to form some better daily habits. Maybe I should kind of pay more attention to what kinds of foods I'm eating, because maybe I'm consuming some things that are bringing down my energy. And remember that this is because creativity becomes tied with your spirituality, and it also becomes tied with your emotional well-being. If your emotional being is not, if your emotional well-being is not being regulated, you will probably come to realize that it is hard for you to creatively express yourself because the two are intertwined. And so this being lit up in this area, right? The Saturn Mars conjunction creates a combination of drive and structure. So you feel like you want to do this thing, but you're like, but I want to do this thing the right way. I want to do this thing in a way that is stable and in a way that is sustainable, long lasting. So that may push you. So this conjunction and what occurs during this time could be tied with your overall feeling a certain amount of drive and inspiration within the fifth house. You're like, you know what, I really want this. That means I need to put more energy into these houses. And that way Saturn, both Mars and Saturn, get what they want, which is for you to put more energy into their houses. The right way has stopped you many times. Well, and that's maybe part of the tricky thing, right? It also probably depends on what's going on in your own personal house, but maybe, think of it like this, right? Aries in the sixth house, Aries is a trailblazer, okay? Aries, they can be good at following someone else's lead, but they're not really known to be the type to really like following the status quo. They like to start their own thing. They like to they like new beginnings. They like taking initiative. In that sense, part of this independent quest for service means learning to do things your own way. And learning, so when I say like wanting to do things the right way, it's whatever the right way means for you, where you can still get things accomplished, even if that's not in a way that other people might consider to be the right way, right? So I think that overall, I mean, you kind of get how I like piece things together. And you know what? Let's also quickly just maybe take into account the traditional. Right. Okay. Good. Yeah, your right way. Okay. So let's also maybe tie in a little bit of the traditional houses. So Saturn rules the third. Saturn also rules the fourth. Which is home, family, your childhood, your sense of security, your private space, your lineage, etc. And then Mars also rules your first house, which is your identity, your personality, or I should say your more outward personality, your first impression, how you approach the world, your appearance, your style, etc. If we also take into account that Mars and Saturn rules these houses, right? It means that Saturn doesn't only, his personal goal is not only for you to gain knowledge. He also has the goal of you having, okay, this person says an authentic quest for roots and family. I would think also that having Aquarius in the 4th house, what that can mean in terms of like searching for purpose or like as an overall goal is Saturn maybe wants you to define family for yourself or define home for yourself. I really get the sense that with Aquarius in the 4th house, it can mean that for you, home becomes other people. Maybe you need to find the social group, the social circle, the community that feels like a family to you. That might be more of what Saturn's goal is, and also for you to find a home and a community where you can be your fully authentic individual self, because Aquarius wants to be authentically themselves, right? So then we look at Mars. Mars, on the one hand, wants this independent quest for service, and then on the other hand, there's the quest for identity, right? And with Scorpio being the ruler of your first house, you really have the tendency to really want to dive deep and really deeply understand your own identity. Maybe your purpose, it's like there is kind of this quest for really truly diving deep and discovering yourself.
Yes, they do.
So if we keep that in mind, then when Mars and Saturn enter your 5th house and go conjunct, they are also trying to benefit the 4th and 1st houses. How can that happen? Well, let's say if Saturn's goals are kind of linked in a way with the 3rd and 4th houses, then we could say that this quest for creativity, or this quest to reach spiritual enlightenment through your creativity, or something along those lines, this can act as a driving force for you to accomplish the things that Saturn wants you to accomplish, which is shown by the 3rd and 4th houses. So we already said that this could drive you to want to study and gain knowledge and gain practical knowledge, even if that's practical knowledge on esoteric topics or topics that are not necessarily considered traditionally practical. I mean, you get what I'm saying, right? But because it's the Pisces energy. But on the other hand, it's also saying that this drive for creativity could push you to seek out a community that feels like family to you. It could push you to search for like-minded people. It could push you to also, it could actually push you to leave your home. So there's two theories I have with this Aquarius fourth house. One is that it can push you to actually leave your home and try to establish a place of safety and security outside of your literal home space. The other thing that it makes me think of is finding a home through technology. So finding a community online, finding a group online that feels like family to you. In that way, this quest for creativity is satisfying both of Saturn's desires. And then, for Mars, your eyes are the eyes emojis are funny. The Mars, Mars's desires in your chart, right? At least for Scorpio rising, more so as a whole. When your fifth house of creativity is lit up, you might feel driven to go on this independent quest for it's more like self-service, right? And in doing so, this probably also contributes to your quest for identity. So it's actually a little bit easier for me to kind of think about how the first house plays a role, because if you're really thinking about it, all of the houses can have an impact on your identity. Okay, so you have been thinking of traveling. Yeah. And actually with the combination of third and fourth. Third is more so short distance travel, but it's still travel. And can also be about searching for community. So when you tie the two together, there is like a feeling of wanting to find your soul family, your true home, where you feel like you really fit in. And Mars, it's a little bit easier for me I think the first house stuff to me is a little bit more self-explanatory. I feel like automatically in doing all of these things, this is part of your inner deep dive to your identity. But if you're trying to really think about it, maybe it's talking about that when this part of your fifth house is getting lit up, you might really start to ask yourself, well, what is important to me? Which part of my self-expression do I feel like is integral to my identity? What are things that I can be more loose with, and what are things that I can, that I am firm in my belief on, essentially. It's kind of like when we're talking about the sixth house, right? Being independent in that area, you really have to learn to understand yourself. You have to know yourself. You have to learn the habits that fuel your creativity and the ones that drain you. You have to learn, like, what are the schedules that people tell me I should follow, and then the schedule that actually helps me, and what does this tell me about myself? What does this tell me about my identity, right? Maybe you realize that you perform better at night than during the day. Maybe you realize that your energy fluctuates a lot, and it's more beneficial for you to have a schedule that is kind of loose and not so like strict. All of those can contribute to helping you learn things about yourself, which contributes to the quest for identity, right? So that's kind of a broad overview of like how you really can start to piece these puzzle pieces together. It gets even more complicated. Well, complicated, but more interesting when you also take into account aspects that Saturn and Mars are making with other planets in your chart. And it gets more interesting, but also a little bit more tricky to piece together when you also take into account the natal placements of your Saturn and Mars. Because that plays a role as well. And whether or not this energy comes to you easily or is more of a struggle will be shown more so through the aspects. So sometimes I think the tricky thing about Mars and Saturn in Pisces, specifically because it's in Pisces, is because you can be driven to be creative, but it can be hard to motivate yourself to do other things. So there is going to be a bit of that push and pull probably. It's like, in theory, this is what Mars and Saturn want for you. That doesn't necessarily mean that during this conjunction all of that will be resolved. It really kind of depends on how it's playing out in your individual chart, right? You could have a lot of drive to want to do these things, but maybe for you Saturn feels like a heavier presence and is causing more insecurities or exactly Tuyen-la. But yeah, so if you basically, okay, I'm gonna like summarize my breakdown. Obviously you can go back in this video later if you want to kind of like, because I didn't really write it down in my notes. Oh, and actually you can't even see my notes. My bad, because I've been taking notes this whole time. It's kind of funny. Here, let me see if I can pull it up. Okay. Like, is the lesson that it's okay to have difficulties in that, like, lack of motivation, but try to learn from that lack? Yes. It's kind of tricky. It's a little bit harder to speak on Mars and Pisces, but we know for certain that Saturn in Pisces is in your natal chart, right? So that's something that is part of like what we call like the natal promise, or it's what Saturn wants for you is tied with that Pisces energy. When we talk about how there's Saturn in Pisces wants to create a balance between idealism and reality, right? And if we think about how Saturn is in the 5th house, it would mean that he wants you to dream big. He wants you to be immensely creative and imaginative, and to really truly express yourself through your art. But you can't, with that type of practicality comes in where Saturn's like, but you also have to take some action. You also have to do some work. You have to put in some effort. You need to have a bit of faith and optimism for yourself. You need to learn how to push yourself forward a little bit. And sometimes that means that, he's like saying you can gain strength from spirituality. Find what works for you, but you still kind of have to get the gears moving. Typically when we say that Saturn causes delays and things, right? So if Saturn in 5th house causes delays throughout your life, it's to teach you something, right? He's not just throwing things at you just to cause hardships for no reason. With Saturn in Pisces, you probably do experience a lot of blocks in creativity, or maybe you get too perfectionistic in your head. Maybe you get overly ambitious, then end up getting burned out. And why does that happen? Why, if Saturn wants you to be creative, it's like you think to yourself, if Saturn wants you to be creative, why is he causing blockages? Probably because he wants you to approach creativity from a new angle, or a way that you hadn't been done previously. If you feel like you're being blocked in certain creative ways, maybe it's because he's trying to push you to creatively express yourself in more of a spiritual way rather than a traditional way. I'm trying to think of like other ways to like word it, but like Saturn causes blockages in the same house that he wants to bless you in, right? That's the case for everybody, no matter where Saturn is. But yeah, exactly. You could say it's like, don't do it in the way it's been done before. Also, though, with Pisces, we have to remember that Pisces is the humanitarian, right? Aquarius is also the humanitarian, but Pisces has this compassion for humanity, that they want to share in each other's pain. It's almost like Saturn wants you to find a deeper purpose for your art. Instead of just creating art just for the sake of creating art or creating beauty, he wants you to create art to touch people's hearts, to heal, to spread spirituality to others. Hello, Jordan. Yeah, I'm sure it does. I don't know right off the top of my head too much about what the 9 represents, but